What's the cringiest or worst examples of butt kissing you've seen at work? Part of my job is delivering children's books to some agencies to hand out. One month, our executive director didn't like the book that came in. There were a couple lines she felt were inappropriate. She asked me not to deliver them, and she would order new books. A coworker of mine noticed I didn't deliver them and took it upon herself to do it. The executive director doesn't care for her, and she was trying to get on her good side. She thought she could make herself look good by making me look bad. I thought she went to lunch. Had no idea she was out there trying to do my job. She came back and proudly tells others that she did my job and maybe now the director will be pleased. She came to my desk and angrily says in earshot of the director, "I just went and delivered the books that you never delivered. I shouldn't have to do your job on top of everything I'm already doing for this agency." I just looked at her and said, well, that was dumb. She went to the director next and told her that she delivered the books since she'd seen it hadn't been done, and asked if there were any other tasks she could do for her. The director was pissed. She was planning on returning those books so she could order different ones. They weren't labeled with our logo yet either, which she would have seen if she checked. It's required that we put our logo on them. The director tore into her for overstepping her boundaries and trying to make me look bad. She tried so hard to kiss ass, and it backfired big time. Oh, and I was praised in front of her for listening. Story 2. My coworker was in a hole. She was rude to anyone she viewed as beneath her in her imaginary org chart, and would kiss the ass of anyone above her. She was rude and condescending to me, literally every day. It was the most petty crap. She made fun of the lab coat I wore, the jokes I made, the food I ate, just about anything. You could tell she had been bullied as a kid and was never a bully because she had no tact or wit and her insults were weak and cringy. Well, one day, she has the audacity to say that I wasn't a real chemist because I don't work with solvents or do extractions, and I took it personally. She said that I wouldn't be able to perform in a SOP for pesticides, which was dumb because SOPs are literally standard operating procedures and are written to reproducible by anyone, within reason. After 6 months of putting up with her crap, I had enough and went to HR. My coworker was reprimanded. The owner of my lab told me that he considered her actions a fireable offense, but we were in the middle of an audit which she was handling, so he kept her on. At the Christmas party, my boss explicitly referenced, though not by name, how saying you're coworker and not a chemist is bad, and that we all should be proud of traits that make us great and work on traits that make us bad. She left right after the speech. A few weeks later was the owner's birthday. We have a tradition where a card is put in the break room and everyone can give best wishes to the birthday person and sign. My coworker wrote the most long-winded message to the owner about being so happy to work at the company and be mentored by him. It got really sappy. She said that she looked forward to working with him for years to come. He fired her that Friday. Story 3. Other receptionist at my work is a huge ass kisser. Calls herself head receptionist when she's really just a part-timer that doesn't do her job right. Will constantly have meetings with the bosses and take credit for things other people do. Most recent example is when a client brought us donuts and left them at the front desk. I was in a room but heard the convo between the client and her about the donuts being a gift. Then heard her walk to the back and announce to our boss that she, receptionist, ordered them donuts because they work so hard. Story 4. As a blackjack, craps dealer in a casino, I had a floor manager that hated me. The feeling was very mutual. One day I was secret shopped and received a 100 present with some outstanding personalized comments on it. The higher-ups were so impressed that the head of table games came down from on high to give me 50 worth of cash gift cards. Unheard of. We normally get 5 buffet vouchers. This all took place in front of the floor, who hated me. This reaches in his pocket and hands me a card for an entry into a drawing for a 10 cafe credit and tells me I did good. Idiot used my 15 seconds of fame to make himself look good to the department head. It kind of backfired when I handed it back and said, "No thanks. I know you don't mean it." Department head hauled my ass upstairs and asked what I meant. I didn't need the job, so I unloaded every single instance of harassment, HR investigations, and backed them all up. Pandemic hit while he was suspended and he was not invited back when they reopened. Story 5. The worst was a guy I worked with at my last job doing HVAC, because the boss was going to get a full report on whatever crew he worked with that day. If you said something negative about the boss, he was going to tell. If you were a minute or two late coming back from lunch, he had a pic on his phone with the timestamp. If you didn't hang something perfectly level or straight, he'd toss a level on it, snap a pic, send it to the boss. He also came in every Sunday and washed all the trucks, with no pay, to make sure we kept a good image. Found out eventually it had nothing to do with the job. He was just dating the boss's daughter, and he was trying to prove himself. Story 6. I work with a woman who threw a baby shower for a manager's, not her manager though, wife, thrown in our office. Meanwhile, her equally pregnant friend in the office was invited to the party but received no shower of her own, or even an acknowledgement from the suck-up. Funny thing is, everyone hates the manager. so nobody really stayed longer than they had to. Also, she tries to call us out for not getting gifts for the manager on National Bosses Day, as if him being paid more to duck things up for us isn't enough already. Story 7. At my job, there was this guy who kept buying his direct supervisor lunch every day. One time, the supervisor asked him why he kept doing it. He responded with, "The king's got to eat." Everyone in the immediate area cringed super hard at that, including the supervisor. Story 8. My immediate supervisor and I were doing a job off-site at a partner company's lab, like an hour's drive from our company, and we finished our task at like 4:30, and I was like, "Damn it, let's end the workday." He insisted on calling the director and inform him we were done working off-site and ask him to officially give us permission to go home a half hour early. The director was like, "You called and bothered me to ask this? Just go home. Seriously. You two are out in the field because you're supposed to be able to make decisions like this on your own." Story 9. This idiot at my work was just promoted because he's an ass kisser. Constantly jumps over people to perform a task, but only when the manager is around. That kind of crap. Recently, he wrote on our manager's door, he has a dry erase board for messages. Manager's name is the greatest. Damn cringe. I hate this git, and I respect my manager less for falling for it. Story 10. I used to work at a huge investment bank on a trading floor. For context, the building occupied a block in NYC, and the trading floor was the size of the entire footprint of the building, like a 5-minute walk there and back to go from one end of the floor to the other. Hundreds of traders. The managing director had a trading station right in the middle of the floor, and me and another lowly underling had our trading stations way on the edge. The MD had a booming voice and was actually quite funny and just yell crap out. Whenever he said anything even remotely amusing, the dude next to me would stand up, cup his hands around his mouth, and unironically fake laugh at top volume. After 6 months, the MD moved floors, and as far as I know, they never ever spoke. Dude was kissing ass 6 levels above him and making all 300 traders on that floor die inside even faster than they already were. I quit, and I live in a cabin in the woods now. Story 11. Had a coworker in my marketing team who was a lead designer. He was often pretty dismissive of junior-level employees, or would try and one-up everyone's stories. You tell him you stayed at a hotel at the beach over the weekend. He tells you he stayed in a penthouse at the same beach for a whole week. He also always tried to be in proximity of senior staff members and would brag loudly if they were within an earshot, hoping they would hear how awesome his life is, I would assume. One day, a vice president from our company had come up to talk to somebody in a pod close to ours. The pretentious designer loudly asked me about my weekend. I gave him an answer. He responded loudly, one-upping my answer. Noticed the vice president wasn't paying attention to him at all. Quickly got up, hovered behind the vice president while he was talking to the other employee. Eventually, the vice president cracked a joke, and the designer let out the loudest, fakest laugh I've ever heard, startling the vice president, who up until then was not aware that this guy was standing behind him. Vice president just got an awkward, close-lipped smile, quickly nodded his head, and walked away. Designer came back to our pod, sat down, and started working as if he was never mid-conversation with me. Story 12. I used to work with a girl who would always change her voice whenever she would interact with our boss to try and seem hot. Her voice would literally go up several octaves in tone, and she would adopt this Valley girl type of inflection. If he wasn't around, she talked completely different. Story 13. My boss sent me out to get her boss a birthday card and gift, which was all fine and good as it meant an escape from her for an hour or so. The card was nothing out of the ordinary, but the cake was very fancy, and not your typical office birthday cake. I then had to swing by Tiffany's to pick up the bracelet that was the actual gift, just from her to her boss. Expensive gifts to colleagues, let alone managers. We're not the done thing there, and it wasn't even like it was a bank or anything high-end, so it seemed horribly out of place and blatantly butt-kissing. Story 14. I saw a weird reverse butt-kissing experience at an old sales job. It was outbound telemarketing. Warm calls, thankfully. We'd call, confirm interested parties for mortgage refinance, and then transfer to the licensed folks to do the actual work. Like any lead-based sales system, the fresh leads were usually the best leads. It started with one person, and eventually their whole family joined the sales floor. Their numbers started above average, and then got into unrealistic. What I mean is that our sales floor goals were 500 dials a day and 10 transfers. These individuals would have 40 dials a day and 35 transfers daily on average. As more of the family signed on and their averages rose, everybody else's averages dipped, many of us even below quota. Didn't take long for us to notice that this family found out that by manipulating the dialing program to assign only fresh leads to themselves and assigning older leads to everybody else, they could get first call on the hottest leads and have higher transfers as a result. This meant large paychecks for themselves and severely reduced pay for the rest of us. The problem is that we got a new manager around the time. He didn't get sales. He also didn't care that this family was abusing the sales system. They made him look good to the management at the home office, since they were proof that 10 transfers a day was too little, since their best were transferring 3 to 4 times that amount a day. This made this family of employees very valuable to him. All attempts to even the playing field would be met with punishment. Any attempt to report any problem with that family to him would be ignored. Any attempt to go above his head at all would be termination on grounds of mutiny. Eventually, they put themselves into a death spiral. Since company policy had a specific through line for not hitting quota, they eventually had to fire most of their competent, hardworking sales force. This caused a dramatic drop in dialing, since there wasn't anyone left to pick up the data slack. This meant that the sales floor was no longer in contractual compliance with the home company, which resulted in penalties. Their reputation was already well known at this point, so they couldn't get anybody competent hired, and anyone they did bring in didn't stay long. Eventually, they had to close the office, since the penalties from the home office became too large to keep the office open, and even that family lost their jobs. Story 15. I heard so many people trip over themselves to say, "We are just so thankful to have jobs." At the beginning of the pandemic, when my old company was slashing benefits, pausing raises, conducting layoffs, requiring 12-hour shifts, all while members of the executive team were taking Zooms from their second homes. Seriously. Literally any complaint or negativity was met with that line. There were a handful of times when leadership got called out on a lie or a hypocritical statement, and some middle manager would spring into action to defend them. Having a job is great, but don't sell out your dignity so some rich tech bros can get richer. Glad I got out there. Story 16. Happened recently at work. One particular coworker is almost insufferable with his behavior. Constant trumpet blowing with his lackluster work, endless comments about how much money he has, degrading other team members to get some kind of moral high ground and get in good graces with management. What's more cringe is his posts and interactions on the team member WhatsApp group. Really fake or cheesy crap that definitely is not his character at all. Basically, everything that he does involves trying to crap on someone to look better at his job. Anyway, he thought he was top crap after one of the managers recently left and applied to take the advertised duty manager role. He was shut down almost immediately, and apparently one of the night managers straight up told him that they did not want him to work nights due to nobody wanting to work with him. Story 17. Told some coworkers I was friends with that I got in trouble with substances. Female coworker was snooping behind some boxes and called HR. She was trying to get a manager position. Damn you, Mary. Story 18. At an old job, we had an app for group communications. A guy that had just been promoted to assistant manager would put out inspirational messages randomly. So you would get a notification from this app, open it up, and read something like, "Hello everyone. I hope everyone is having a terrific day. Let's try to come to work with positivity and good energy. Remember, what you put out into the universe is what you get back. So let's put that positivity out there and attack the day with that mindset." Worst part was, his personality didn't match up with the messages. So he was relatively cool in person, but was clearly putting out these messages to look good for the owners. Story 19. Guy at my job would counteract his crafty performance with ass kissing. It helped him keep his job for a very long time, until he told someone to duck off on a recorded call. Story 20. The girl my boss hired to help me and I trained started having an affair with the second in command. For the next year, I got to watch her, feed him fruit with her mouth while doing almost nothing all day. She would go on 2-hour lunches, got promoted, a raise, and I had to continue to take the load of the work she was initially hired for. Story 21. One of my coworkers is the biggest idiot I've ever met. I have worked part-time for the company for 7 years and met hundreds of people, none of which I disliked. Sure, there were people I would not hang out or even talk with outside of work, but at work, I got along. This guy is on another damn level, and I can actually say I hate him. First day on the job, he comes in and acts like he owns the place. 2 guys were working on this project, and he comes over and says, "Yeah, good job on this part. This is how I want this done around here." Both these guys are in their 30s. Been with the company for years and just stand there looking at him like he is stupid. He always called himself the smartest person in the department and how he is going to run this place. And because he finished his bachelor's a year early, he is a genius. Also because of his degree, he thinks he understands the inner workings of running a business perfectly. This kid lectures on about efficiency all the time, yet he is on his phone 80% of his shift or talking. Everyone hates this kid. Department managers, full-timers, and even vendors from outside the company can't stand him and talk nasty behind his back. He is clueless. 6 people reported him to HR, which our rep doesn't like him either. They had a meeting with him and changed nothing. The wild reason he can act like this is because he is friends with our corporate district manager's son, and he snitches to this guy about stuff going on. It's bad enough he is a tool and a snitch, but it's even worse that this DM listens to him, even though he does nothing. Thank God I am leaving that job soon. Story 22. I was in a group interview once where I was one of probably 15 people. Group interviews are pure gold for ass kissing. In that interview, we had a guy that tripped over a table and knocked it over because he wanted to be the first one to shake the interviewer's hands. Also a lot of, and if you pick me, then I will bring this talent to the company, bull crap. Story 23. I had a boss who was into finer things of life. Good quality clothes, expensive wine, exotic food, cigars from all over the planet, heaps of watches, and expensive cars type thing. So a coworker of mine, within 2 weeks of beginning, bought my boss some cuffing worth in the hundreds. Over the course of 2 years, this coworker became known as a yes man, never disagreed with the boss at all. He also self-appointed himself as his right-hand man, always telling other people how to do things because that's how the boss would want it, kind of like a less aggressive version of Dwight from The Office. Anyway, a position officially opens up to become supervisor, second highest rank of the department. Naturally, my coworker went for it, telling everywhere would listen he would get it because the boss promised it. What he didn't know is that the boss was leaving, named the then supervisor as his successor, who then picked someone who had been working there for about 9 months. Needless to say, my coworker has been acting very distant to the new manager and supervisor. Story 24. I don't remember the exact context, but the boss sent out some email about the office doing well, and some guy replied all accidentally thanking the boss for his exceptional leadership and dedication, or some bullcrap. Me and my cube neighbor audibly groaned. The thing is, we are an engineering services firm. The boss in question is the regional office manager, and at the end of the day, we do well based on the execution of the engineering packages and the practice manager's ability to sell more work. The regional office manager doesn't get work. He manages the financials of the office. Anyway, Mr. Brown-Noser is a low-level manager now. It doesn't mean much, but it puts him on the path to a cush job down the road, not to mention fat bonuses. Story 25. At my previous job, the whole company had transitioned into WFH, and so primarily all communication was done over Slack. I had this one coworker who would log in at 6 a.m. to wish everyone a great morning at work, and then he would pop back into the channels at 11 p.m. to say goodnight and wish everyone a great evening. This man would do this on his day offs. This was crazy to me. He wasn't a manager, wasn't a supervisor, or a lead. It's clear that he was trying to gain points with the supervisors who were eating it all up, but I really thought it was the weirdest thing ever. We also had many Slack channels where only authorized personnel was permitted to speak in. Send alerts in, and each time a person put in a company-wide alert, that same coworker would go in and write the exact same thing just to act like an authority figure, show us that he had power. I remember he started working at the company after me, and so I asked my manager how he was permitted to do all that, and he wasn't. He just did it, but nobody minded since he was such a kiss-ass. Story 26. Oh, I have one. This coworker was getting married, and she talked a lot about her wedding at work. There was another coworker very close in age she bounced ideas off of, and they became really close over the course of wedding planning, and the bride used to call the coworker her work bestie and make all sorts of references to her coming to the wedding. Bride-to-be eventually told coworker that she would have loved to have her at the wedding, but there just wasn't room for her. The amount of people had been settled on much earlier, etc. Coworker understood and took it pretty well. Turns out, coworker is very well connected to some higher-ups in the office, and was later talking to someone who revealed that she had met bride-to-be twice and immediately gotten an invite to the wedding. When they found out the lowly coworker hadn't been invited, the higher-up didn't want to go, and convinced a whole bunch of other higher-ups, who also barely knew the bride and had gotten invites, not to go either because bride was clearly using her wedding for networking. The bride-to-be got a pretty crafty reputation as a suck-up after that. Also, it was extra weird because we work in a pretty tame white-collar office where you don't need to be a crazy networker to have a successful career or rise in the ranks. Like, I know in some industries you kind of have to invite your boss, but this isn't one of them. Plenty of people don't invite anyone from their work to their wedding, and no one really cares. Story 27. Are chronic question askers arguably ass kissers? I think there is a clear, distinct difference between those that ask questions because they're genuinely interested or need an answer, and those that ask questions just because they want their voice heard. Story 28. I called my boss by his first name when I started out, and my coworker scolded me after he walked away saying, "No, you call him Mr. So-and-so." She'd also always go out and buy him his lunch. Like he cut your maternity leave short and he underpays you. What's in it for you? Story 29. I had this coworker at Target that would go on the biggest power trip for no reason whenever he was on guest services. Guest services is the people usually at the front of the store where you do returns and stuff like that for anyone that doesn't know. We all would alternate doing it, and it was usually with a manager. There's literally nothing special about it besides that it was slightly more tolerable than being on a register. Whenever said coworker would be on guest services, he would think he was manager and was the most unbearable person for the hour he would be doing it. One shift, I was walking to the bathroom, which you had to walk past guest services to get to. And he went out of his way to loudly ask me where I was going in that managerial tone I'm sure you're all familiar with, as if he was a manager. I just looked at him and kept walking. He would do similar things like that to everyone, and it was just the cringiest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen someone become such a kiss-ass because they did a slightly different role from everyone else for an hour. And everyone did guest services like we literally just alternated throughout the shift. Story 30? Not a specific one, but I had a colleague we nicknamed Ankles Coes that was all you could see sticking out the boss's arse. That's probably an incorrectly used apostrophe. Story 31. My damn manager. He is head of our engineering department, takes credit for everything when reporting to directors, overpromises on results and timelines without knowing how long things actually take. Best experience I've had. We had a financial year-end meeting and I'm in charge of compiling all production figures and creating a clean report, even went out of my way to produce some stats to see how we can evaluate ourselves and improve what we do. This ducker starts presenting this thing, with me in the room saying I this, and I derived it like that. The director asked him a question about one of the data sets, and he did not know and sat there blank. So I just spoke up and explained how I did it. Could see some other people around the table were choked up. Best damn feeling. Story 32. We had a manager that wasn't really qualified for his job and loved it when people called him for help doing their basic job duties. To this day, I don't know if a couple of my coworkers were thoroughly incompetent or just sucking up because they couldn't do anything on their own. I'll give you 3 guesses on who avoided the layoffs. Story 33. I work for a guy that has multiple companies, hotels, and event halls. Due to pandemic, one of his restaurants acts like a canteen for all of his employees. They prepare one meal for every day, and that's it. Cue in this Monday. I went to the restaurant, and on the way, I ran into my boss, who was also on his way to have lunch. So we went together. When we entered the restaurant, my boss asked the chef what was on the menu. He told him and directly followed up with, "But if you don't want it, I can prepare you something else." I didn't think anything about it at first, because, let's be real here, my boss earned every bit of respect, not only due to his handling of the whole pandemic situation. He didn't fire anyone, even though the event halls and restaurants are basically closed since over a year now. Not a single person, doesn't matter if part-time or full-time, not even temporary helper. Long story short, my boss said to the chef that he's fine with the menu and don't need something special. The other guy followed up with, "You sure? I can prepare you something. That's really not a problem." And again, my boss said, "Really? It's fine. I eat what we have." We got our plates and sat down. Not even 5 minutes later, the chef came over to our table with a plate full of 6 different meats, vegetables, fries. Food worth of 3 to 4 servings. My boss looked at him, looked at the plate, and just said, "Okay, just leave it here then." The second my boss was done with his lunch, the guy ran over and took his plate back to kitchen. Only his, not mine. What was fine because canteen service doesn't include this anyways, and I was not expecting him to clean after me. He came back with coffee. 1 coffee. When my boss asked, "Can you please bring a second one?" He just glared at me but did it anyways. Shortly after the coffee, he got a dessert for our boss, and again, nothing for me. Our boss asked him to please bring a second one because otherwise it would be rude towards me. But I just declined and said I was full already, and I was actually expecting him to spit into it. His gaze said it all. It was overall really uncomfortable for me the entire time. He jumped through a lot of hoops to please our boss, who didn't want anything special in the first place. And he had this burning hate in his eyes towards me because I was sitting on the same table. Story 34. This girl was constantly kissing the ass of a manager everyone hated, to the point she said she guessed she was guilty of larceny that they later found video of the manager committing. Story 35. I used to have a guy that was on a temporary contract that would wait in the parking lot before I got there. He would jump out when I did so he could walk in with me. "What do you got for me to do today, boss?" Well, man, right now, I got a duck-off attitude going on because I don't want to be talked to at the ungodly hour of 4:45 a.m. about ass-kissing nonsense as soon as I get out of the car. Guy ended up getting let go for poor performance, which explains the ass-kissing. Story 36. This other girl my age was desperate to get ahead in sales. She lived with her equally well-educated boyfriend, and when you'd ask stuff like, what does he do? What's he up to lately? She would give vague answers. Got the impression he wasn't pulling his weight in their relationship. She started dressing like the president of sales, followed her around at all times, would find out gossip and relay it back, average ass kissing. The weirdest thing is that the sales president had dietary restrictions and in general was obsessed with healthy eating, was very thin, and never ate. The president would enter the kitchen and comment on people's food. It was awkward. Sales girl started eating like veggie sticks and nothing else. All of a sudden, had a gluten allergy. It was primarily a women-run company, worked in interior design-related field. And we would have these meetings complete with donuts, cake, etc. The sale president would say how good it all looked and wouldn't touch it. Everyone got the idea and also wouldn't touch the food. I got fed up and one time cut a huge piece of cake in front of everyone and sat there and ate it during the meeting. Sales president and sales girl looked at me like I broke a huge unspoken rule, like I somehow didn't read the room. I got laid off a year later, and sales girl is second in command there after 5 years. And I have a way better job where no .1 gives a crap if you don't have a work-sponsored eating disorder. Story 37. It's not really cringy, but just being a yes man over literally everything. My boss could and has made contradictory statements during meetings that the yes man supported. Both just made me both groan audibly and die a little inside. Story 38. I worked at a digital marketing startup for about a year. Most of the employees were in their early to mid-20s. So was I at the time. And management absolutely played favorites. Working late hours was a solid way to get management to notice you, even if your work didn't necessitate staying late. I once got crap for leaving at 5:30, even after working a full 8 hours and getting all my work done. One morning, we were all having a company meeting, and one guy mentioned how tired he was since he stayed in the office until 10 p.m. the previous night. Immediately, this other guy loudly says, "Well, I was here until 11. Then he literally looked around to make sure management heard him. Story 39. This isn't my work, but this new girl is like a hippie who showers once a week started about a month ago, and the boss is trying to duck and making it so obvious. Whenever she says something, he doses it right away. He takes her for lunch and even told her everyone's salary. Crazy part is they're both married and have kids with their partners. I told the people that work there to talk with HR, but the boss literally runs HR, so they're ducked. Story 40. I worked at a zoo kitchen as a bartender and ice cream vendor. The chef was a tyrannical a-hole sometimes. I guess he had frustrated ambitions as a chef and wanted to be a TV tyrant host on Food Network. Sometimes he was okay. I learned he, as a 80s Bill Murray, Chevy Chase-style sense of humor and joking with him, eased him up. I only worked with him minimally. A few of them who wanted culinary careers sucked up to him, always calling him chef. I just called him his first name. His main protege always called him chef and was obsequious. A big zoo banquet started stressing him, and he raged out at staff for minor mistakes. His protege flipped, thought he was going to get fired and stormed out, cursed him, and tried to incite a general staff walkout. The rest of the staff had families and bills, so they ignored him. So kissing his butt got to him, I guess. The chef went off on me after I got a concussion hitting my head cleaning cabinets. I just quit and told him he needed to not antagonize his staff to avoid mutinies, and never showed up again because my doctor told me to lie down. Story 41. We would always eat lunch at the cafeteria as a group, our female boss included. There was an unwritten rule that we shouldn't talk about work, so we usually talked about music, TV shows, or activities would do on the weekend. While talking about music, my boss said that she enjoyed listening to trance during workouts. And this girl said she totally did it as well. Then someone asked the boss what kind of music she liked, and she started saying things, like country music for long road trips, Jack Johnson to unwind and relax, etc. She proceeded to specify situations and connect them to music genres or artists, and at each example, this girl would totally wholeheartedly agree that she did that as well. "Me too! Me too!" she kept saying, to the point that the boss noticed and started to joke that she really enjoyed Nin and the Beastie Boys for her quiet moments while reading a book, and the girl said another, "Me too." So the boss asked what was her favorite Beastie song, and she couldn't name one, and not even mumble a tune. It was obvious to everyone she had no idea what kind of music was that. Needless to say, everyone in the office bought her a Beastie Boys CD to her birthday, including our boss. At least she gave them to the janitor, who was a massive BB fan. Story 42. I was working in a call center for an insurance company that was heavily micromanaged. So much so, we had 20 key performance indicators to adhere to with every customer. My husband was really sick, with a degenerative disease that was not yet diagnosed. He rang and texted me multiple times, so I sneaked out on a toilet break to call him. He was frantic as he was in loads of pain and needed to go to the hospital. I went straight to my manager to say I was leaving to meet hubby at emergency, and she looked blankly at me and said, "Are you sure you can't finish your shift, then leave?" I was upset and said no, so she then tried negotiating with me, "How about an hour?" So I just burst into tears and left. I was so upset and angry that I posted on Facebook that my insurance company and manager had no heart, and making money was more important than any of their employees. My suck-up, a whole colleague, took a screenshot of what I'd said and sent it to the state manager. I had meeting after meeting and threatened with my job. They ultimately kept me on. All this happening while my husband was in ICU. Story 43. There was a director working under the CEO who was a real psycho idiot, the kind of woman who gives female bosses a bad name. She always wanted pastries in meetings. One time she comes to our department for a meeting and there's a plate of croissants. My managers and senior managers start the meeting. One of them is doing a presentation. She interrupts him in the middle of his presentation to complain that there isn't enough butter on the croissants. These managers are all middle-aged men who have worked in the industry for years. and the completely break down in the face of this absolute shrew. Chaos ensues. They run around like headless chickens, searching frantically for more heavily buttered croissants. They grovel. They beg forgiveness. The admin assistant who bought the croissants is summoned, questioned, and blamed, but the director is having none of that. Finally, after 5 incredibly cringy minutes and repeated offers to go to the shop and secure new croissants, the idiot boss just sighs and says, "No, don't be silly, it's only croissants. I'd just like them with more butter next time." And that was the day that I watched a team of 6 middle-aged middle managers almost reduced to tears over croissants. Story 44? During a meeting with about 6 people around a table, the male boss spilled his drink on his own lap and ruined his trousers. As he got up to leave, this male coworker took his shirt off, kneeled, and proceeded to try and dry the boss's trousers with his own shirt, in a position that everyone immediately understood as totally akin to a BJ about to happen. To make matters worse, after 2 or 3 strokes, we all could see through the trousers that the boss had an instant massive junk on that he couldn't hide even if he wanted to. So there we were, watching bad quality amateur adult film live in the office. After about 40 seconds of this, the boss looked around and must have seen our faces, so he left immediately. And the coworker just went back to his chair and sat there, shirtless, like nothing happened. We're all like, okay, this meeting is over. And start to collect our belongings to leave as the boss comes back with a fresh pair of trousers in full business mode. So we conclude another 20 minutes of the meeting with a shirtless boss. Pleasure himself dude sitting at the table. The tension between them was so palpable that I really hoped they had a go at each other afterwards. Story 45. I was given a coworker, a young boy, to learn the ropes of the CNC machine I operated, manual custom stairs CNC. I had picked up he was my replacement. I had asked for the promised raise a week earlier. When in the bathroom, never gossip in the bathroom, there's always someone there. He sucked up to our employer, even to the point of bringing in pastries for him, until he got promised my position. Fine, I'm sick and tired of this low-wage company anyway. So I educated him in how I operated the CNC using wood blocks as spacers. As soon as he got the hang of things, I was fired. On my way out, I threw away the custom-made, by me, spacers. Turns out he never replaced them, making $250,000 in wrong-sized stairs in the 4 months until it was discovered. Then he was fired as well, and they tried to sue me. Still love the look on the git's face. He looked like a pug, eyes popping out, screaming his head off. Told him he'd get a good beating. Most satisfying result ever. Story 46. This was from a customer, not an employee, but a guy who was pretty notorious for annoying people at a previous job I had, was once talking to the store manager and telling him how he tells everyone to shop there. It was like a broken record. And after a short time, the manager, who was in the middle of doing a task and largely ignoring the guy, looked up and said, "You're wasting my time," and walked away. The guy still tried to continue talking, but thankfully it was too late for much more of that. Story 47. Worked as a front desk agent at a huge hotel chain. I saw roaches literally everywhere, including the kitchen. I told my coworker that I am ready to report them. I only told her this because she told me she was ready to report them too. She ended up telling my managers, and they all came up with some insane way to get me fired the same day during my next shift. However, she really wanted to see me get fired, so she came early that day to watch the crap show. She was really digging me, so she started flirting with me as she knew she would never see me again. Little did she know her boyfriend was also in the lobby, towards the kitchen, so she could not see him. He watched everything, and I didn't say anything to my coworker about him watching. He got up and instantly dumped her. She started crying and cursing up a storm. She got so mad that she started cussing at our managers, and she ended up getting fired. Not only did she get fired, she lost her boyfriend and got me fired because she thought she could kiss the ass of our managers by defending them from my corporate reporting. Story 48. Just your typical yes, sir. No, sir. How high, sir, as soon as they walk in the room type stuff. I've never been afraid of a boss like that, and I was never afraid to say no to overtime either. They never bothered to ask me in the end, and that was just the way I liked it. If I wanted I asked them, and it was on my terms when I actually wanted to do it, although I was at the bottom of the list, if people wanted it in front of me. Story 49. This just happened yesterday. I work in a big orange box retail store as a merchandiser. We have a new transfer to our team who is doing her very best to show off her vast knowledge and impress our supervisor by pointing out people's mistakes whenever she gets the chance. So while another coworker and I are on a project together, she comes over and changes the placement of a sticker and tells my coworker to put on gloves. No big deal, gloves heard. But I tell her a new training recently changed the placement of said sticker. She gets frustrated and tells me she went to merchandising college, so she should know better. Cue big eye roll, but whatever, I leave it. She then waits for our supervisor to walk by and loudly asks if coworker has put on those gloves yet. Safety is a choice, blah, blah, blah. What the duck, lady? You can clearly see he's wearing them. Then supervisor notices this sticker is in the wrong place and asks me about it. I look over and can see the gears turning in her head. She says, "Oh, that's how I was trained at merchandising college. I didn't realize they changed it." I just told you. I got a bit of vindication, though, supervisor told her. Chuckle knows her business, and please don't jump into other people's projects anymore. I know it's not the worst story here, but I was still astounded by her blatant ass kissing. Story 50. I used to have this really gross, ignorant boss. She was rude as duck, and we work in a project management area for a North American company. I was in charge with the international freights, logistics, and customs. My boss didn't have a degree, nor she speak English at all. That's not a crime, but I believe that if you work in English, you should at least be able to send a damn email without sounding like Siri with a stroke. I was in charge of a huge order coming from Asia, and my boss decided to team me with a novice friend of hers. That guy was a git. He didn't know what to do, when to do it, or even communicate with the sale company for information. I ended up doing the whole thing, and after that, my boss praised this guy a lot, and he was like, "Yeah, I did all by myself because Alex is a good for nothing." They fired me, and long story short, they ended up being a holes and call me to this day to help them figure out how to import things, GG. Silly people everywhere. Story 51. At my work, each month we have a list of celebrations that are submitted by managers and read out at our formal team meeting to about 70 people. This is usually to celebrate good pieces of work that have been done, like someone writing a report that was praised by customers or giving a good presentation to senior managers. Now there's one massive ass-kissing middle manager in my team, let's call him Ted, who always has to try and jump up the ass of the boss in any way he can. Let's call him Steve. Ted's also on a temporary contract which ends soon. During the latest team meeting, we'd gone through the latest list of celebrations and we're about to move on. Ted then chips in saying that we shouldn't forget to celebrate Steve's amazing golf swing. Steve's such a fantastic golfer, and I think the team should appreciate that and celebrate it properly. Cue total, cringeworthy, tumbleweed-inducing silence from everyone else in the meeting. He'd said it totally seriously as well, not like a joke or anything that anyone could laugh off. And the worst part about it was Steve's reaction. He didn't deflect the cringy-ness and move on. He just stared blankly at Ted, saying nothing. After what felt like an eternity, someone said, "Shall we move on?" And it was left. Honestly, when I heard that, I cringed so hard. I almost threw up, it was so cringe. Story 52. Worked at a place where the CEO painted a lot of her own art and would leave it around the office. There was other art too, but hers would also be splattered around. All well and fine. The CEO and CFO were giving a tour to some clients. The clients ask about some of the art. The CEO explains it's her and laughs, saying it's a little weird she has it up. The CFO, a notable kiss ass. "Some of the best art up. I would even have one for my home." The CEO laughed and called him a brown nose. We weren't a creative studio or design or anything. It was a law office. They're both lawyers. Story 53. I used to be a middle manager, but was demoted due to taking the heat for one of my supervisors duck up. Best thing that happened to me. But that's another story. A no coworker who used to suck up to me, but now that we're on the same level was a real crap. We're walking along with our new manager, and we're walking across bundles of steel, about 2 foot high, where we had to watch our step. When we reached the end of the bundles, the manager stopped, but the coworker was too busy watching his feet and knocked both of them off the bundles. After making sure they were both okay, I said it was bound to happen sooner or later due to his head being so far up the manager's ass. Story 54. I'm currently in a Zoom training for a job. Our personal team leader is very young and this was his first job. He loves to talk about himself. Like it's getting to the point where you can see other team leaders are getting annoyed with him. Anyways, there is a kid in my cluster and I had to stay overtime to complete some documents. This kid, the entire time, is the only other person staying in the Zoom, and he just keeps, "Wow, Steve, you're just so good at your job. I want to be like you, Steve." Of course, Steve loves to talk about himself, so he just talks and talks and talks, while I'm sitting here like, guys, let me get my damn work done. It's been 2 weeks, and that guy just kisses his ass all day, every day. It's cringe-worthy. Story 55. I had a couple coworkers that didn't like my new boss, like would bad crap them when they weren't around. However, they would talk to them in the office, close doors, and gossip about everything. Since I was new, I never really paid attention until I heard my name one day through the door. Turns out my boss was telling these coworkers about my performance and what to do next. Since these coworkers have been around for years, they suggest tactics to use. I got laid off, but these a-holes still have their job. Like, what the heck? Story 56. I used to work at a restaurant and one of the servers was having an affair with the general manager. I'm pretty sure she was literally a butt kisser. She was awful to work with and a total snob. She got paid more than everyone else. She didn't have the minimum wage that servers got. Her paycheck said she was a cook and she made an extra $2 an hour plus tips. She always got the good section. It was a seat-yourself kind of place, so some sections were consistently better than others for tips. And she refused to pull her weight or help anyone when they were busy, but would expect help from others when she was busy. Heck, even when she wasn't busy, she'd expect people to help her like bus her tables or make her drinks for her. which was part of the server's job. And she was allowed to do that because she was literally ducking the boss. In the office, during work. That's how everyone knew. Story 57. I applied to go to a private middle school when I was 10, and I still can't believe how much the application process brought out the worst in people. When we had an on-campus tour with the other applicants and their parents, people were going so far to kiss the tour guide's ass that the parents were literally writing notes on paper as if they were going to be quizzed. I saw kids ask unnecessary questions just to show that they were good at certain subjects. At one point, a kid stubbed his toe and swore and then was like, "Oh, I apologize, I didn't mean to say that." It was some of the cringiest kiss-assing from both kids and parents that makes me never want to apply to a school again. Story 58. Worked in a food warehouse. We started working 12-hour shifts, and I was not adjusting. I never signed up for those hours. The bosses decided to have a contest one night. $50 for the most cases picked, $50 for the most full pallets picked, $50 for the most walkie case picks, cases only on the ground level, and $50 for the most improved. I busted my ass to get the most walkie cases picked. Of course, they ran out of walkie case picks. I switch over to case picks, which is the exact same work except on a forklift. Hours go by and still no walkie case picks. My shift ends, and guess who won the pony by 3 cases? Not me. Some old lady that never busted her ass ever in that warehouse wins not only walkie picks but also most improved. I go to find out a few days later she's ducking the guy that provides the order slips. I was officially done with that company. Story 59. I had a job at a crappy grocery store chain where I didn't give a crap when my coworker absolutely wanted to be promoted. He would try to act buddy with the GM of the store by cracking jokes and keeping a close eye on potential thieves, yada yada. It was eye-rolling crap. One day I catch the coworker legitimately selling substances on the store floor to a friend of his during a slow shift. I wasn't going to do anything about it, but he immediately runs upstairs to the GM and tells him that I screamed at a customer and called them a racial slur. I would never. I got reprimanded and sent home. Within a week, Mr. Kissass was promoted to a grocery manager. Not quite a strong kiss-ass story, but a dude who wanted a promotion by any means necessary. I got the last laugh eventually. He went out and bought a brand new Dodge Charger and a few months later was fired for selling substances during work hours. The Charger was repoed soon after. Story 60. Our electronics guy when I worked 3 yards at Walmart was so hell-bent on getting a promotion to support manager that he walked around and spoke to us as if he was management. We all would just yell him to duck off. Well, since none of us liked him, he'd take his break after the managers did, then go find one of the support managers and eat his lunch, Indian style, on the floor by where they were working. Guy was basically their little show dog, but they would never promote him. Saw 5 support manager opening come and go, and he was never considered. Not to mention the guy would cry over some girl from the other shift who he wouldn't talk to, but he'd try asking us what to do about it, like duck off and grow some balls. Story 61. I worked at a medium-sized tech company a few years ago. There was this one bloke, Dwayne, that kissed the CEO's ass daily. I was close to one of the engineers was a really hard worker and who I'd have a laugh with daily, but wasn't as experienced as Dwayne. Dwayne told the CEO he ducks around at work too much and he needs to concentrate more. The CEO relayed this to my friend. He also bought coffee whenever possible for the CEO. My biggest issue with Dwayne was how often he'd rat on people. Story 62. I was part of a panel interviewing a candidate for a sales job. My boss, a vice president, clearly didn't like the candidate. The candidate's answers were vague and full of business bees that signaled that he didn't know what he was talking about. I think we were all eager for the interview to end. Just as we were wrapping up, the candidate focused his attention on the vice president and said, "What is the secret to your success? This is clearly a well-oiled machine." You could feel the remaining air go out of the room. It was likely he'd read this question in an article called something like, "How to Crush Your Interview." The vice president glared at him briefly and then ended the interview. Story 63. I don't have any great ones of employee to boss. I think the cringiest, in my experience, were all employee to employee. There's a guy at my office now who is constantly giving the fakest-ass compliments you've ever heard, for seemingly no personal gain. Crap like, "Oh, Robert," who wears like the same 3 black, navy, or gray polos every single day. "Has anyone ever told you that look great in a polo?" Or to me, who usually wears contacts but occasionally glasses. "Oh, Steve, those glasses just make your eyes pop." In like, always the most ham-fisted over the top. Yes, this guy's a former actor now trying to make it in tech. Never mind being 10 years older than everyone else in the company. Voice imaginable. Story 64. Coworker bought our manager at KFC a birthday gift and card when she had only been there about 4 months and was the newest employee. His birthday was early February, and immediately after she requested Valentine's Day off, and of course she got it, despite holiday requests were supposed to go by seniority. Story 65. I had coworkers that when see the chairman arrive through the glass would jump and meet him at the gate and they greet him like a king. I mean with a little bow, and some would go for kissing his hand while saying, "Good morning, Your Honor." It did work out for some of them, and I figured out later that if I did greet him a little bit, just with words, it would have helped my career a lot. But I still wouldn't do it. It's too stupid. Story 66. I wasn't there to see it, but I've been told it many times. During Christmas, we have a secret Santa with the rule it can only be worth $20 or less. One woman ended up getting our big boss as her secret Santa. And instead of sticking to the $20 rule, she brought an expensive handbag and wine for our boss. Our boss, seeing how it definitely wasn't $20 or less, had to find out who it was and tell her to return it as it would be seen as a form of bribery in the workplace and, well, obviously did not follow the secret Santa rule. Story 67. My coworker made moonshine in his garage. Spent days working on it, perfecting the recipe. At the company Christmas dinner, he sat next to the coup of the company and during the gift giving. When everyone got sweet company jackets, he pulls out a box of moonshine and gives a jar to every member of management to include the coup. The kicker? I had been promoted a month prior to the spot he thought he was going to get. I did not get a jar of moonshine. Story 68. A kid in my grade once sucked up to the teacher so hard that they started having their lunches together. And sometimes she would exempt him from stuff because he was such a kiss-ass. Kid was a genuinely nice person and had really good grades, but no one liked him because they thought he was a teacher's pet. Turns out, midway through it slipped that the teacher was his mom, and that's why they ate lunch together. And he didn't get exempted because of special treatment. The kid was just so smart that he didn't need to take the tests. Story 69. I used to work for a very large engineering firm. Occasionally, we would get emails from some bigwig director to congratulate some person or group, and usually containing some generic ending like, "Let's congratulate this person for their achievement." Without fail, there would always be one person on those emails that would you reply all with something like, "Yes, boss. Excellent job on this amazing accomplishment. Keep up the great work for the company." Story 70. This weird guy kept following the boss everywhere, and you could tell that he was annoyed, but he never said anything until he followed him into the bathroom and talked to him over the stall wall. Story 71. The assistant manager gathered the staff of the store just before opening for the day, about 8 people, and wanted everyone to applaud the exciting news that we did so well at meeting our sales goals that the standing right there store manager, and no one else, would be getting a small bonus. Story 72. My colleague had a massive brown nose. I once came back a minute or two late for my lunch break because the PIN terminal didn't work in the office cafeteria. They had to guide me to another place to let me pay by card. When I explained this to my direct manager, this disgusting woman looked up from her cubicle and said, "Well, I just went there as well and it worked perfectly fine for me." Needless to say, we never really gotten along after this incident. I hated working in a call center. Story 73. I had an old colleague who made us all put money together to buy the boss a Christmas gift, even though we'd already done Secret Santa. She got her a watch. Boss was clearly annoyed at it, and it was very awkward. Anyway, fast forward a few weeks, old colleague had gone and bought herself a matching watch. Oh, the cringe. Story 74. Not exactly butt kissing, but my coworker has the need to appeal and be the center of every conversation I have with our boss. When he has no actual opinion of his own on a topic, he would cut off the end of my sentence and say, "Exactly." That's what I was about to say. It annoys me to no end. Story 75. A coworker kept trying to get promoted and kept failing every time a position came available. Our boss always talked about her kid, always started each meeting with photos of her kid and the latest highlights of the kid's life. Think Little League playing with grandparents, first day of kindergarten, things like that. This coworker named his kid the same name as our boss's child. This coworker got promoted. Story 76. I got a coworker here that will throw anybody under the bus if it will make them look good. We have all learned not to talk openly around this little snitch. Story 77. Certain individuals who consistently stay late and work overtime without accepting additional pay. This has given the company cause to not pay out overtime, and they now expect a certain amount from all employees at any given time. Story 78. This actually happened today and has been happening since I started working my current job. We have a coworker who laughs at the top of his lungs to whatever the boss says. Be it funny, be it crude, he laughs his ass of literally out the door. Then back to normal, like hitting a switch. What's the most unethical thing a boss has ever asked you to do? Story 1. Many years ago, I was working as a part-time mechanic for a guy selling restored cars. He called me in for an emergency brake repair on a TR4. One of the rear wheel cylinders had failed and he needed it fixed ASAP. He had a buyer lined up with cash. Instead of having me hone and rebuild the cylinder properly, I had the tools and the kit to do so. He wanted me to cut the pipe to the rear brakes and just crimp it over onto itself, enough to stop the leak. He was in a hurry and wanted it fixed before the customer saw anything. I fixed it properly anyway, so that no one would die, and then rolled my toolbox out of there that very night. Story 2. It's definitely worth a read. I worked as a temp in a production factory in between permanent jobs. I was on permanent 12-hour night shifts making plastic fuel cans. They also made chemical bottles too for bleach and other things. I had been on site for about 2 weeks when I went out for a cigarette break. The guys in the unit next door were part of the same company, and as I was standing there, I saw a guy hit the emergency stop button and open the safety gate to clear a blockage from the machine he was using. He cleared the blockage, and the machine that shouldn't move once isolated decided to finish its cycle, which hit the operator in the chest. I ran in, managed to free him from the machine, hit the emergency button to let the night manager know there was a problem. The supervisor came in first and panicked and ran for the manager. When he came in, I asked if they had called an ambulance. They looked at me like I was an alien and said, "We aren't allowed to call an ambulance because that could trigger a HATES visit." I told them I'd call one myself and get the HATES involved. The old guy who'd got hurt was in agony and having a lot of pain when breathing. And these a-holes didn't want to get him medical treatment. I called the ambulance myself, and as a qualified first responder, I gave them the details of what I'd seen and also told the paramedic about them not wanting to call the ambulance because of the HSE, Health and Safety Executive for anyone wondering. The old guy had 3 broken ribs and potentially fatal. I gave the old guy my contact information in case he wanted to make a claim against the a-holes he worked for and went home. I got a call the following day from the agency saying that the company didn't want me back on site. She asked me what had happened for them to say that, so I explained that an older guy had been crushed in a machine and they didn't want to call an ambulance for him, and I had to treat him because they had nobody qualified on site. She asked if she could call me back. She rang me a couple of hours later to tell me that they had pulled all of the agency staff out of there, and she had ringed the HS herself, which was totally unexpected for an agency. The good news is that the old guy came through it okay. The company got a massive fine for the multiple breaches of HS guidelines and shut down for 4 months, while the safety gear was brought up to an acceptable level. Story 3. My old boss at Dollar Tree would make me drive her to the bank in my car every night, and she would have me park like 10 feet back from the ATM while she walked up to it. She told me that if someone ever tried to run up on her while she was depositing the money, I had to run them over. She said if they were too close to her to just hit her as well. She was incredibly adamant that I absolutely had to do this, and very serious. Story 4. First job after I graduated college. Boss called me into his office and had me sit next to his daughter while she took an online exam. Told me to make sure she passed it. She definitely wouldn't have passed if I wasn't in the room. Story 5. Keep people at work when there was a chemical leak from the car painting shop next door, and people were getting sick. The boss wasn't on site, almost never was. I tried calling him and got no answer. And I was the most senior worker on site, so I sent everyone home. When I was almost home, 1-hour commute, he called me back. He had gotten my voicemail where I explained the situation and he was not happy. Apparently, we should have waited it out, or I should have arranged for everyone to work from home. Not possible. The guy was a banana head, but this one still makes me angry when I think about it. Story 6. I worked for the largest property management in San Francisco, and frequently the manager would ask us to shred checks that came to us so they could file for eviction on tenants. I quit immediately. Story 7. Proofread an essay for her 16-year-old daughter so she could get into some school summer camp program. After they both read it, she gave me $100 because it was so good. Story 8. When I was 16, I worked at Spencer's in the mall. The store manager was a middle-aged female who found out she was being demoted. She made the decision to instead quit. Her last day, I happened to be closing the store with her. Nothing weird, we had done it many times before. After everything was closed and locked up, we were punching out in the back room. I went to open the door that led back into the store, and she physically put her hand over it and closed it like a scene from a movie. Then she said, "You know I make schedules right." I said, "Yeah, I understand that." She said, "Do you think it's a coincidence that you and I are closing my last day? This is your opportunity to do anything that you want with me." I was so uncomfortable, and I didn't know what to do. So I gave her a hug, and she said, "Really? That's it." All the while, her husband and 2 kids were waiting in the car outside the mall to pick her up. Story 9. Not me, but my dad's story. 1980s. My dad worked at a small Midwestern bank as an executive. One day, a fellow executive comes in with several loan applications and says he needs them all approved. My dad looks over them quickly and immediately realizes none of the applicants qualified. If they approved them, the loans would go into default within 3 months, and these people would lose their farms. My dad said it wasn't possible. The other exec says, "Well, if you just fudge the numbers, it is." My father tells him that's impossible because other exec never walked into his office, and they never had this conversation. The other exec nods and takes the papers back. 6 months later, the FBI raids the bank. My father was the only exec who didn't go to prison for fraud. Story 10. Also at Dollar Tree, most of my cashiers were teenagers or dip craps that never showed up for work. So this older Korean woman kept getting called in to work the register. She was pretty much getting 40 hours every week. An open season for benefits was getting ready to start. My district manager called me and told me I had to convince her to not get any benefits, or else. I told him that else better be him doing that crap himself because I'm not about to do his dirty work. Story 11. I ran a report at work. It supported an initiative he was opposed to. So he set up a meeting and asked me to run a what-if scenario that would make it look like his initiative was better. I told him I could. However, I'd have to let our department vice president and the other department vice president know it wasn't a real report, just a made-up one, so they wouldn't make decisions based off of the analysis. Which they were going to do, which is why I was running the report to begin with. He chewed me out for 30 minutes saying he decided what was real or not. Literally laid into me, called me every name in the book. So I sent 2 reports, both conflicting each other, and the 2 vice presidents held a meeting to ask what the heck. And we get in there and my boss starts it off by saying to me, "Why did you send conflicting reports? This makes no sense." Completely threw me under the bus. Story 12. I had a manager that tried to get me to falsify reports to the feds. Financial stuff. I flat out refused. Soon after I had to leave the company for I would have been fired for made-up bullcrap on his part. To this day, I will never regret standing my ground. Story 13. I used to work in the bakery department of Sainsbury's as my first job when I turned 16. At first it was just stacking shelves. But eventually they wanted me to work in the bakery itself. They emphasized several times that under no circumstance was in to use the bread slicer, as I was not old enough. This lasted about a week, until I was on the closing shift in the bakery on my own. The shift manager came in and started shouting at me about why I hadn't sliced all of the bread. I told him exactly what I had been told by my supervisor and another manager. He told me he doesn't care, and that I couldn't finish work until it was done. This being my first job, I just agreed to do it. About 3 months later, the machine developed a fault, and it ended up lightly electrocuting me. I raised the issue and put it into the accident book. When it was investigated, I was blamed by the manager as I shouldn't have been using the machine to begin with. When I reminded him that he was the one who told me to use it, he denied it and gave me a written warning. Once the machine had been fixed, he still expected me to use it. When I refused, he sent me home and didn't add me to the rota for another 3 weeks. Story 14. I'm a fleet mechanic. Owner of company got mad at employees trashing his vehicles and told me to go out to the people's car with a drain pane and drain the oil out of their personal vehicles and put the drain plug back in. Story 15. While working at a fast food restaurant, we were preparing for a corporate inspection, and my job was to clean the walk-in cooler and freezer. My boss told me to wet mop both. When I mentioned to him that wet mopping the freezer would cause it to turn into an ice rink, he told me to put a cap full of antifreeze in the water. I told him this is the freezer where we keep beef, chicken, and French fries, and I was not going to do it. He threatened to write me up, but I still refused. He did not last long as the manager. I will not name the fast food restaurant because this happened almost 25 years ago. Story 16. This was during the Honduran caravan that was coming up to the U.S. A 19-year-old girl from Guatemala fell off the wall and broke her leg. I was pulled off duty, Border Patrol, to take her to the hospital, since they had to put a cast on. Obviously, her jeans couldn't go back on, and they put her in one of the hospital gowns, which, as you can imagine, doesn't insulate very well. Driving back to the station, the supervisor calls me to let me know that her paperwork was done. And since at that time, we were sending single adults back to Mexico with no court date, he said to bring her back to the port of entry and walk her across the bridge. Now, even though you might think it stays warm on the border, around December at midnight, it gets damn cold. Not Montana cold, but still around or just under freezing. So I asked the supervisor if we were going to at least let her stay in the detention facility so she could be returned in the morning when things had warmed up a little. After all, this was a 19-year-old girl with a broken leg who had never been to Mexico, had no money, and now no pants. Nope, just drop her at the Po and walk her back. Well, damn. Stopped by an ATM, pulled out $50, called one of my buddies who was from Mexico and asked him where a cheap motel was near the bridge. Gave her my WhatsApp info and walked her across, put the $50 in her pocket, and told her where to go and to call me the next day. 2 days later, me and the same buddy went into Mexico and put her on a bus to a different city in Mexico, closer to where her aunt lived, on the USA side. Not sure if she made it. She texted me when she got to the city in Mexico. So I have hopes she at least made contact with her aunt, but I don't know if she made it into the USA, so yeah. Was ordered by a supervisor to drop a freezing girl with a broken leg in a foreign country at midnight. Story 17. My boss had the Thursday afternoon off, but kept texting me. He had obviously been drinking as it was getting more persistent and inappropriate. I was trying to ignore it, but then he started asking why I wasn't answering him. I replied, "I'm working." His response was, "Well, stop." Honestly, 4 hours of nonsense like this along with innuendo, inappropriate gifs, etc. It would have been bad enough, but I was trying to get everything done as I had the next day, Friday, off. Friday morning, I wake up to another text message, not email, which is the only form of communication we should be using. The text is a detailed description of a huge proposal I have to do for him in time for a presentation he has to deliver Monday. I was fuming. Why not ask yesterday when I was actually working? I remind him that I have the day off today. His reply is that I can just do it over the weekend. What the heck? I cannot believe that he actively prevented me from working properly on a workday and then throws this as me once he's sobered up and wants to sabotage my weekend with it. Story 18. I had to help my boss work at another store when I was working at Aeropostale. After we left the store, we stopped at some guy's house. She asked me to wait in the car and text her if anyone pulled up. I found out later she was having an affair with this married guy. This happened a bunch of times. I just thought it was a friend or something. She was going in there and having sex with this guy while I was the lookout. Story 19. Worked at a shady, for-profit higher education institution. Was still early in the job and didn't really know how bad it was. Honeymoon period. Was doing well and excited that I was helping people go back to school for something they really wanted to do. My success got me more attention from my manager, who wanted to give me one-on-one coaching. He proceeded to listen in on my phone calls at my desk and push me to convince people who really should not be taking out massive loans to go to school to go. Normally, I was politely turning these folks away and offering up suggestions and still having enough enrolled to gain attention. After a day or two of this, he went away to focus on other people, and I went back to my previous method. Fast forward about 2 weeks, and the regional director decided that she wanted to gain some insight into my performance. She mentioned offhand that she'd been speaking to those in the compliance office at the company, folks who listen in on all of the phone calls, and heard that someone had been turning people away instead of enrolling them. She said that our job was very clearly to get people to enroll in school and do whatever it takes to do that. I mentioned that sometimes people may call who really aren't fit for our programs. And she said, if they have federal loan availability, they're the perfect fit. I told her that it's obvious what she's doing, and that despite me looking out for people and having the best numbers on my team for enrollment and retention, this was a my eye is on you type of check-in. She nodded and said she appreciated me understanding. I told her that I would not be engaging in unethical behavior to force people into taking out loans that they cannot afford to pay back. Thanked her for the job and said that my values just do not line up with the communication style. I put in my 2 weeks right after that conversation. I came to work the next day, a 1-hour drive, to find all of my stuff on the front sidewalk of the building in a box with my name on it and a note that said, "Hope you can eat your morals." Bonus is that about 3 months later, I was contacted by the USA Department of Education to offer my testimony on unethical business practices in education that my former company was engaging in. They were shut down shortly after, and within the last year or two. Students who were preyed on are finally getting the justice they deserve. Too little, too late, and I sincerely regret the part I played in that whole disgusting system. But so thankful I stepped away when I did. Story 20. Run it till it breaks. Me standing there running a $11.5 million machine that uses liquid gold and computer parts for cars, telling bosses and technicians that it's making horrible rattling sounds. It broke and cost them $8,700 and 3 days downtime, instead of $90 and 1 day's maintenance. Story 21. Doesn't 100% answer the question, but my boss used the social media that I ran and monitored to cheat on his wife, then fired me when he realized I knew. Story 22. Clean out the closet in my apartment due to the nature of the work. My apartment was on company premises, and the closet was an old storage area that I never opened as it was still insulated with asbestos. Boss said it should be fine as long as I didn't sweep too fast. I left before I cleaned my closet. Story 23. This was years ago at my first job, at a very well-known sandwich chain. During my first week there, my supervisor made me SC the gum off of the sidewalks in front of the store with a Doe SCR, and said something along the lines of, "This is initiation," or something like that. I thought they were joking at first, but they were dead serious. I just remember customers passing me on their way in and out. While I was on the ground scraping away, then having my supervisor come out and point out the spots I missed or didn't get well enough. Felt super embarrassed and a little humiliated during and after. They thought it was funny. Story 24. I have one. Worked in a recovery residence, a step up from a halfway house, but less intense than a full-on rehab. Had this client come in after someone at another facility spent weeks advocating for her and helping her get everything in order and raise the funds to come into the program. She was super dedicated to it too. About a week in, other staff, I wasn't there, observe her nodding out a couple times. They conclude she had snuck substances in somehow and was still using. Client says no. What she thinks it is that she had run out of a certain medication and was having trouble getting more. Thought that could be causing it. My boss tells me to kick her out. She has nowhere to go. No money. Boss says, well, if she thinks she is withdrawing from her meds, she needs to go to the emergency room. I say, what's that going to do for her? She essentially says, well, there's nowhere else we can dump her and not look like a holes. I take her to emergency room and leave. Emergency room pretty much just takes one look and kicks her out, thinking she's just an addict medication seeking. A few weeks later, we find out that she actually had a damn concussion. It was discovered after her advocate got her into an inpatient detox program. It's so convoluted and dumb. I was so damn disgusted by all this, it made me quit the industry altogether. A bunch of damn narcissists who prefer to use their own emotional, biased judgment to make decisions that deeply affect people's lives, rather than actual evidence. Damn despicable. Story 25. Loaded unknown chemicals into the nose of tractor trailers for out-of-state transport. I'm sure it was all illegally dumped. Just out of HS, I had no idea the scope of what was happening. Nothing was labeled. Containers, trailers, and manifests all claimed empty containers. Story 26. Back in a butcher shop portion of a grocery store I worked at. The supervisor asked me to change the date on some burger that wasn't selling. The day she asked me to do this was the sell-by date. I even asked her if that was safe, legal. She just tapped her name tag that said supervisor on it and said that was the only thing I needed to worry about. I put new tags on all of the packages while she was there, but I didn't put them on the shelves. After she left for the night, I found the store manager and showed him. I showed him the old tags, which were just under the new tags, so it was easy to pull them back and prove it. He had me toss the burger down the trash chute, and my supervisor was gone from the store by the end of the week. Story 27. The store manager of the grocery store I worked at made an entire shift of mostly kids, ages 24 to 16, shift manager included, work through a power outage. A car hit a pole a few blocks away and knocked out power for almost half the town. And when the shift manager called the power company, he was told there was no way power would be restored that day. Regardless of all that, the store manager, who was playing golf at the time and was very upset about being interrupted, told us we had to stay until closing. Store manager argued that since one of the registers was still working off a battery backup, we could still stay open. The shift manager didn't know what else to do, so he agreed and had us stay. There were no lights on anywhere in the store, so customers had the choice of using their phones or one of 4 flashlights we managed to scrounge up. The only way I could enter items was to manually punch in the barcodes. All transactions had to be in cash, since the card reader wasn't battery operated. All of our freezers had temperature alarms built in, so those were all going off. After an hour or so, the battery finally died. The shift manager was very quick to kick out all the customers at that point. He didn't even call the store manager until after he'd sent us all home, just in case the store manager wanted us to stay longer. I quit after my next paycheck cleared. Story 28. When I was in college 30 years ago, I worked in an area director's office for Social Security. I was a clerk, typist, so I handled the mail. There was an employee in the office that they wanted to keep, but the position became official. So the standard process for job openings was to send the job posting to every office in the area, half a state. All applicants would send their applications, resumes to a national office, and they would rank the candidates. The manager of the position could then pick from any of the top 10 applicants. Since the director really wanted one person, but they were afraid they wouldn't end up in the top 10, I was instructed to forget to put the job posting in the mail to most of the branch offices. Yes, I'm old. It was all snail mail then. There was no email, at least not generally. Sure enough, there were only 6 applicants, 5 of which were significantly more qualified than the person she had already handpicked, so got her pick of any of them. Guess who got the job? I was young and afraid for my job, so I went along with it. I wouldn't do that now. Story 29. Not me, but my dad was once rostered from 9:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m., and then 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. the following day. So he'd finish at 6:30 a.m. and then have to start his next shift in just 30 minutes. Obviously, he didn't do that next shift, though. Story 30. I used to work as an assistant manager for a certain fast food chain while I saved up money to go to college. The store's labor-to-sales percentage and breakdown was displayed on a large screen at the front of the store, and the store manager would download the data and monitor it often. The manager of the store would give hours and raises to his assistant managers based on how well we ran labor during our shifts. He would very often encourage us to work off the clock for a few hours, and to have us ask some of the other employees to work during their breaks to drive labor costs down. This is far from the most unethical and crazy thing that happened there, but it's the most unethical thing that my boss asked me to do while I was there. Story 31. I have a good one. Old boss asked me to find out his ex-business partner's family's addresses so he could buy their homes. They rented for whatever price necessary and evict them out of spite. Story 32. Terminate a person for attendance when they were in the hospital. I worked for a tech support company based out of California who supports different Fortune 500 companies. I had a team of about 25 people who reported to me, all done online, and we all worked remotely. This individual had excessive attendance issues and had followed all protocol in getting doctor's notes and such. They ended up hospitalized, and I was told to call and fire them and let HR worry about the rest. I argued, and was told if I didn't, I wouldn't have a job anymore either. So I did it. I told her I didn't have a choice and I was sorry. I think she understood my position and didn't seem upset at me. Still haunts me to think I had to do that to a person going through something like HTAD. FYI, I don't work there anymore. Damn that place. Story 33. Worked for a restaurant. and one night the manager was partying with the owner's son after hours as I was leaving. The next morning, I saw the manager a block away from the restaurant as I was coming in for my shift, and he asked me for a ride to his aunt's house. I told him I would be late if I did, but he told me not to worry about it. Walked into my shift about 30 minutes late, just as the cops were leaving. The cook told me that my manager had gotten wasted the night before, trashed the walk-in freezer, and stolen some money. As I was setting up the bar, the owner walked up and asked why I was late. I told him what happened, and he asked me where I dropped the manager off. Something felt sketchy, so I was very vague about exactly where that was, and he walked off with his assistant. Come to find out a few months later that the restaurant was actually a front for a Mexican cartel, and the owner's assistant was a hitman. Was super glad I didn't tell them exactly where I dropped off my manager. Don't know which is worse. My manager asking me to help him get away from a crime scene, or the owner for asking me to rat on the manager so he could hit him. Story 34. Use a 32-foot ladder to get onto a 3.5-story high roof. Tried to tell an 18-year-old employee who's on his first real job that an overhand knot is just as good as a figure 8 when used for fall protection. It wasn't just a rope, there was a harness and a lanyard as well. Told me on multiple occasions to ignore the uneven tip hazard alarm on a man lift. Forced overtime, put up a fight when I asked for a drill so I could put an anchor into a roof to use for fall protection. And took the drill out of the van multiple times without letting us know on days when we needed it. Told an employee who had been shocked by power lines because his water-fed pole had touched them that he shouldn't get that checked out at the hospital. Work cleaning windows about 50 feet up in a mall. Multi-story mall, so heights were different at parts. Without securing our gear in case we dropped it or even putting any signage down below. Use of a man lift in unsafe conditions being high winds. Use of chemicals without providing MSDs after being asked specifically in areas where we would be working near food. Not all of these were things that were directed at me specifically, but things that I'd seen in my time working there. I am sure there are more, but these are the ones that I remember off the top of my head. Story 35. Wasn't me, but the people before me. The company gained a massive contract with a mining firm to check all their samples. For technical reasons, we had to put 0.002 of a gram of a particular chemical. This was 30 years ago. I can't remember the chemical. With each sample, no more and no less. The company started falling behind, so the middle manager who ran the tests told everyone to only put 0.02 of a gram with the sample. Basically quadrupling the speed as it takes a long time to get 0.002 of a gram of anything. So the sample results go back to the mining company, which shows they hit a rich seam of copper. Mining company invests $30 million to mine it, but there is a problem. The samples were out, so there was not that much copper, and the mining company sued. Instead of taking the blame, the middle manager sacked 90% of the staff that worked under him. The only ones who survived were introverts who would never speak out against him. Suddenly, there were all the jobs available, and I took one of them. But I only lasted a week. Sacked me, as I wasn't an introvert. Story 36. Hide or remove all the Chinese writing on the boxes, glassware arrived in at a high-end pot shop. So the owner could sell $25 cheap Chinese bongs as $300 German glass. After I quit, I told all his buyers what the boss paid and he had to close his business. Story 37. A boss I worked with asked me to help another manager in the financial department to do a homework he had to do as part of a master degree. The manager was doing a master in computer science management and took a dev class. I'm an IT engineer. He wanted to pay me to code the work he had to do, a basic calculator program in Java. I refused for ethical reason. Story 38. I used to work for the second largest manufacturer of frozen breakfast food in North America. I ended up as a production lead at one point. I was put over line 9, which made French toast of various kinds sticks, slices, cinnamon swirl, etc. Anyway, the spiral freezer after the oven became compromised due to a mechanical failure. Long story short, the freezer chain was shaving off tiny pieces of some plastic guardrails and was getting on the bread. We raised more than a little concern and were promptly shut down. They had maintenance look into it several times. More than a few times, I shut the line down as the products we were making were served in school cafeterias. I then got my ass chewed. This went back and forth for several months until one of our leads accidentally sent an email about Freezer 9 to all of the company. Quality rather than our plant. Quality. It literally came down to a $70,000 freezer chain when we produced $40,000 a day in damn bread. Story 39. I was a satellite installer in the early 2000s, DirecTV specifically, but I worked for an authorized retailer. We had an older lady ask for a lot of work. High-def TVs hung in every room, surround sound, the works. The company made at least $15,000 off of this lady. She was very sweet to us installers. But the boss hadn't reordered any of the high-def dishes and had me install a standard def dish, temporarily. This poor woman called in regularly and requested me each time to come and fix her high-def. After the third time, I told my boss that if he didn't give me a high-def dish for her, I'd tell her he was damn her around. He sold the company about a month later, so I called her and told her what he had done and my complicity. I managed to scrounge up a dish out of leftover parts for her and went and installed it as an apology. I kept in touch with her for years until her passing. After that, if I felt it was wrong, I simply refused any unethical requests from whichever boss I've had since. Fortunately, not many, though. Story 40. One time, my old boss got mad at me for hiring a black kid and wanted me to fire him to enforce her rule of no blacks. I felt so stupid that I hadn't realized sooner that it was all white people working in any area a customer saw. I said, damn that crap. If she made me fire him, I'd quit. I was passionate about what I was doing and worked tons of unpaid overtime. I ran like 40% of the business and took it from losing money to making profits in under 2 months. She couldn't really take the loss if I left. Well, I'm sure she could lose tens of thousands of dollars, but it would have hurt bad. I worked there like 5 years, and it was the only time I got in trouble. She said the type of customers in that area would be put off by a black employee. BS. My customers were nerds who were obsessed with what I sold. I was an obsessed nerd, as was the black kid I hired. When you are into a very nerdy hobby like that, you only really judged other people in the hobby by what they knew and how good they were at said hobby. He was good, and so I hired him. He did just fine, was my best employee. Story 41. Purposely doubled the weekly expense reports in order to show that one manager was overspending, in order to get her fired for it. My boss was a cruel woman. Note, I told my boss I would not do that, and she made someone else do it. I still kept my job until the pandemic killed it. Story 42. I worked as a personal trainer years ago, and the owner of the gym I worked in told me to have my clients get results slower so they would buy more training. Story 43. He was only indirectly my boss, but absolutely could have had me fired probably easier than my actual boss if he had wanted. I worked 2 summers as an installation tech for Axe, now Vivint. And one of the summers, the lead sales guy, who was trying to get the company best that summer, had me do 2 installs, one right after the other after midnight, where he was paying the customers to get the security systems installed, knowing they were going to cancel after, like, a week just to pad his numbers. I only needed to install the barest minimum equipment to get it to count, and I don't think I actually even attached anything to any walls, doors, which is not actually the most shady thing. But I remembered that it wasn't the lead sales guy, but just one of the other regular sales guys, who had me on an install where the credit they ran for the customer to qualify was the customer's past brother. The first one was the slightly more unethical thing on my part, but the point is that Vivint summer salespeople are absolute scum. Story 44. As a premise, even though I was about 16 years old at the time, I was roughly 6 feet, 250 pounds, and I've always been a pretty big guy. With that being said, I worked at a grocery store, and this manager I had was much bigger than me, and a hole. He was literally chasing a woman in the store because she was shoplifting, and while he was chasing her, he told me to tackle her on the ground because according to him, she would fall hard, which is probably true because she was about 5 feet 2 inch, 110 pounds. I didn't listen to him, and just stared in shock, and watched the woman run out of the store with the goods in her jacket. Just in case anyone is wondering, the manager was demoted about 2 years after that due to slamming a shoplifter into the wall, who was pregnant. To be fair to him, there was apparently no way to tell the woman was pregnant, since she wasn't poking out much and wearing a hoodie, but the guy was a banana. I don't condone stealing either, but I'm not going to go full Paul Blart on these people. Story 45. Put people's emails in a newsletter without their knowledge or permission. This was before the protection data laws came into place, but I always thought it was shady. Story 46. Our boss asked the whole staff on Thursday if anyone wanted to work overtime over the weekend, hoping to complete an extra 500 orders. And if we completed said 500 orders, everyone would get a $500 bonus. I asked her, what happens if we don't complete the 500 orders? She then said no one gets paid. So I said, so in theory, we could complete 499 orders and we wouldn't get a dime? She said correct. I promptly turned their offer down and realized I was working for idiots. Story 47. I was a custodian. 4 years then. Pandemic hit, people quit or just never show up. I'm on 3rd shift, so I was asked to do 36 hours of work in one night. So my job was to clean surgery at night. I asked him, what about surgery? He, with a straight face, says, half-ass surgery. During a pandemic, Story 48, I have worked construction my entire life. One boss in particular did everything wrong and claimed to be very high-end. We once took on a huge remodel job in a very upscale neighborhood. LeBron James's Akron O neighborhood. Not his house, but just an idea of the scale of the home. My boss got way in over his head when we started taking out walls. He never got an engineer or an architect involved, and basically the entire 3-story home is held up by 6 nails and a joist hanger and a small block of wood. If that fails, the house will cave in. I have pictures of the entire process still. I frequently internally debate on contacting those homeowners and showing them the pictures and telling them to call their lawyer. This was done about 5 years ago. I quit after that happened. I talked to one of my former coworkers who stayed, and he told me that the upstairs bathroom tiles started cracking and popping. This means the house is in fact moving. Story 49. 2 days after the 2014 Super Bowl, where my poor Broncos got trounced by the Seahawks, my boss comes up to me towards the end of my shift and tells me I have to pull a few reservations and get them in before I go. He apologizes and tells me I can come in late the next day by however long this took me, and he'd buy me lunch tomorrow. I was salaried at the time, so this struck me as odd because they could easily ask me to stay late with no compensation. This behavior was explained as soon as I opened the Rees and saw the first name. Turns out I was booking last-minute celebration trips for half the Seahawks defense, and my bosses assumed that a bunch of guys that just won the Super Bowl would be making it rain, so they were giving them the works. Several hours later, I left and told my boss steak sounded great for lunch the next day. I also had to drive someone around for a few days in college that was heavily suspected of trying to groom students. But the first story is so much better. Story 50. A boss was studying his high finances master, and he ordered me to do all his papers. Had not too much of a choice. I was young and naive. He always told me, "You've got B or A." Honestly, the guy got the credits for that subject because of me. I even did his study guides. It was not too bad, I think. I got the chance to get some up-to-date knowledge from the syllabus of a very expensive university. In marketing, the agency where I worked had hired some super fancy and expensive prediction tool. They paid it only for a while, and then, when they no longer paid for it, they tasked me to Photoshop the reports to adequate them to each new client needs. Also, in another agency, the boss asked me to do her Google tests for her so she could get the certification. Marketing agencies tend to be very shady. Story 51. I worked for a pawn shop for about 10 months. I'm not sure how it works in other states, but we were required to submit documents on everything we took in that day to a law enforcement database. Brand model, serial number, model number. Seriously, people, when you file a police report, if something is stolen, include the serial number so that law enforcement could try to track down stolen goods. We had a policy when someone came in with an out-of-place item, like in this story, an obvious homeless person with a $2,000 bike, to lowball it as much as possible to get it into inventory, so that it could be returned to its rightful owner quicker. Well, my boss saw me processing this transaction and told me to change the serial number on the bike so that law enforcement couldn't claim it if it was stolen, and we could make a buck. I ignored him and put it in correctly. Got chewed out when law enforcement claimed it for putting the correct serial number in. Put in my 2 weeks the next morning. Story 52. I worked in a convenience store the summer between graduating high school and starting college. The assistant manager, who was in charge of the night shift, when I usually worked, would regularly have friends come in and get a cart full of snacks for late-night parties after the store closed. She'd have whoever was on the register step aside, and then ring everything up like it was only a few cents. They'd walk out of the store with over $100 of snacks and pay $2 or $3. She also showed everyone where there were blind spots on the security cameras and encouraged everyone to take advantage of that knowledge. I left for college in the fall and heard the whole staff got fired a few months later. I applied at a different location the next summer when they saw I had worked at that other store, but that my name was not on their corporate do not hire list. I was offered a job on the spot. Story 53. Former boss had me sign his wife's name on tax documents. They were divorcing. I knew it was wrong, but was too young and meek to say anything. He did a lot of shady crap in hindsight. I really should have scored a better severance package. Story 54. My first job at a movie theater. I got the job on recommendation of my friend who also worked there. My friend is Jewish, and this will come into play in this retelling momentarily. Our boss had decided to tell me, after being frustrated by not just me, but my friend as well, for not doing the job of the older kids decided not to do, to quote, "Tell that stupid wandering dude to do his damn job." If that doesn't count as unethical, then I do not know what does. I did not, in fact, tell my friend, the aforementioned wandering dude, to do his job. I walked back down and told him, "We actually need to quit. Trust me." Story 55. I used to be a behavioral therapist for kids on the autism spectrum disorder and was a shadow aide at school for one of my clients. One day, my kiddo's classmate comes up to me and tells me how he has seen his dad hit his mom multiple times. I end up calling my supervisor to inform him of what happened. I was 18 and had no idea of how mandated reporting worked. He told me next time to mind my business when I asked him the process for calling Child Protective Services. Of course, I called CPS and had the emergency hotline social worker walk me through the process. Unethical and illegal. Story 56. I'm a speech therapist who works in nursing homes. The director of nursing at a home one time told me to recommend a feeding tube for a patient because they just didn't have the time that it took to feed her. Story 57. Know me, but my brother was a quality control engineer for a major airline. He discovered that most of the seats were bolted down with bolts that were too small. Seats could potentially break loose if the plane had a hard landing. Boss told him to sign off on it anyway, because it would cost millions to go back and fix it. My brother told him to sign it and quit on the spot. Story 58. My manger asked me to go pick up his lunch. I told him no. He was like, "What? Why not?" I said, "I write software, not run your errands. If you want to go grab lunch together, we can go, but I'm not picking up your food for you." Story 59. I almost got fired for giving a Vietnam veteran my employee discount. I helped him around the store for an hour as he told me his stories. He was incredibly kind, and when we got up to the register, he showed me his card and asked if we had a veteran discount. He was a Marine, and my brother was currently in Marine boot camp, and my grandfather served in WE in the Marines. So I want to do something regardless of the consequences. My brother's ex-fiancée who worked at the store, side note, she stole loads of money my brother while in service, informed the manager, and an investigation was started. I refused to admit any wrongdoing and claimed he was family. Nothing came from it, but the manager reprimanded me endlessly and wanted me to admit he wasn't family. I quit about a month later due to school, but this instance definitely helped in my decision. I regret nothing. Story 60. Worked as an industrial painter for a metal fab company. After so many hours of respirator use, the filters have to be changed in them. When I asked where the replacements were at, the boss told me to stuff it with tissue paper. I sat in a chair until someone brought proper filters that allowed me to paint in the booth. They held out for 3 nights and got another man to paint without a respirator while I sat. I was told to change out the wall filters, which were filled with toxic paint, and throw them in the dumpster since it was a new one and the filters would be hidden in the bottom. I told them he'll know. On day 4, they had respirator filters and had a waste procedure for toxic wall filters. I lasted longer there than I expected, considering I was so young and bold, but I knew what was right. Story 61. Sleep with a girl with him that he had just spiked with substances. Was a bouncer at a club and the other guy was head of security. I went straight down to the police. They didn't seem interested. So I went back, watched him, worked out who the girl was before the substances had taken effect, and got her friend to take her home before she ducked out. Watched him the rest of the night to make sure he couldn't do anything and reported him that next day to his bosses. Story 62. I got my own apartment when I was 16, and my 50 married boss asked me to let him and my 17-year-old coworker use it to have sex. Stupidly, I said yes. I cringe at that now, but I was young and thought I was being cool. This was in the late 70s. Story 63. Had a vehicle that was damaged by company-owned property, notified manager, and he basically said, well, if they don't notice, then neither did we. Very obvious damage, and very obvious it was new damage. Got a call an hour later from an extremely irate customer that we didn't bring this to their attention when they picked up their vehicle. Cost around $2,000 to fix. Luckily, I was not the one operating the equipment, but I was the one that brought it to management's attention. Seemed very shady and unethical. Story 64. To bend over and let him spank me with a paddle from the shop floor shelf. It was one of those live, laugh, love type signs. I told that 5 feet 3 inches balding fat to go duck himself in front of several colleagues and customers. I don't care if it was a joke or not. I don't appreciate being hot by a creepy middle-aged man who yelled at me every day for doing my damn job better than everyone in that damn store. Story 65. When I was a junior network engineer at a data center, the owner asked how interested I'd be in sabotaging the competition. Think I was around 20 at the time, poor. And if he had offered more, I might have. Story 66. To boil a lot of technobabble down to 3 words, cook the books. I told him to go to hell. He told me, you're fired. I told him, saved me the trouble of quitting. Was plenty glad to go work somewhere else after that. Story 67. I worked for a multi-state property management company. I was their equivalent of an assistant manager and collected rents, processed move-outs, and security deposits mostly. You could break the lease if you paid a termination fee equal to 2 months' rent. I was authorizing refunds for people if we rented the apartment during that 60-day period, so like the rent was $1,500 per month. So they paid $3,000 to break the lease. It was vacant for 27 days, so I refunded them for 33 days, or $1,650. I was told to only do this if they requested it in writing and other nonsense. I stood my ground that it wasn't ethical to keep money I knew they were entitled to, just because they didn't know to request it. I got fired for a bullcrap technicality 2 weeks later, but my conscience is clean. Story 68. I was a sniffer, leak detection and repair, for a refinery I won't name. Was a contracted job, didn't directly for the refinery, etc. Found a valve leaking and reported it. Valve was in one of the worst areas in the refinery to monitor. Valve was leaking more than I'd ever seen something leak. Hundreds of thousands ppm, completely busted, meaning I couldn't do anything to repair it. Reported it, etc. 3 months later, I'm monitoring that area again, same valve, worse readings. Reported again, and they refinery contact, kinda like our boss, but we don't work for them, but they handle our crap. Told me to go back and take a different reading. I told them I wasn't comfortable because it was illegal to falsify readings. They took it off my route and deleted my reading and went and took one of their own. Story 69. When I was working as a service advisor for a car dealership, a customer who was damn near penniless and was in desperate need of repairs to her car managed to get approved for a repair loan for $5,000. I got the transmission repair down to $1,500 by pulling every string I could and calling in a ton of favors because I felt really bad and there was kids involved. My service manager got wind of it and told me to jack up the prices and get every penny of that loan. I submitted the claim for what I negotiated the price to and immediately started looking for a new job. He didn't catch it until I was long gone. Damn that guy. Story 70. This one's kind of funny. I was an engineer and salesman, and our customer asked us to break out the cost of each engineering package. My boss asked me to change the margins on each item to front-load one package that he was. So sure, they had to buy this one item. It ended up being 60% margin on that one package, and the others were split between like 30% margin. This is apparently illegal to do. I've learned this at my new company. Anyways, the funny part was that the customer cut out the one margin heavy item, and we made less than regular margin on all the other stuff that they did order. Some even were a loss, because costs increased beyond our budget quotes.